Hi there, I'm Daniel from ByTheBrush Miniatures, and today I'll be showing you some sculpting and converting ideas for your Nurgle models to make them look like that servant of the plague god that they're supposed to be. So here's an example of a Nurgle conversion that I have already previously completed. First thing I'll be showing you how to do is these Flushy Growths that you see on the plates of the armour. So if I just put him on one side, I've already pre-made this ball of green stuff. Make sure that your green stuff is always wet before you work with it. And for this, the only tool that you're going to need is just a humble cocktail stick. Make sure that all your tools are always wet whilst you're working with them as well. And make sure your fingers are also wet when you're handling the green stuff, just so that it doesn't stick to you rather than your model. So first you want to roll it into a ball just so that it's nice and workable. Then just squish it down so that it's fairly flat. You do want it to still have some body to it though. Then take your cocktail stick, make sure that it's freshly wetted, and then just drag out the edges of the green stuff like so. And if you get any bits come off, that's fine. Just adds to the natural feel of the sculpt. And then just do this all around the green stuff. Make sure that your prongs, whatever you want to call them, don't go out too long, because otherwise it's going to make it very awkward and make it look very spider looking. You want them to be fairly small. And all of these extra bits of green stuff just roll up into a ball for later use. And you just want to finish this all around the green stuff. And here is the completed Flushy Growth. I have just completed it off camera so that you didn't have to watch us go around the entire thing. And there you go. You just want to have applied that to a fairly smooth surface on the model. You can either apply it directly with the green stuff, or if you want a bit of a stronger bond, apply it, just make it on the palette and then apply it later with some super glue. But it will adhere fine if you apply it straight on the model, just because of the nature of the sculpt. And with this, because it looks a bit odd as just a random bit of flesh on the model, so with this you can do some extra stuff. As you can see with the actual model itself, I've not just done the Flushy Growth, I've added some extra stuff. And I'm going to show you some of the stuff you can do with that now. To make those pustules, all you're going to need is some form of sculpting tool similar to what I'm using here. Just make sure that it's cylindrical and hollow. You don't want the edges to be too thick, but you don't want them to be too thin either. What I'm using here is the lid of a Citadel painting brush. Just wet any tools that you're using. Make sure that there's no water leaking into it. That should be fine. And then just get the sculpt and press this into it. You want it to go fairly deep in, but you don't want it to go too deep, as you still want there to be mass underneath. Otherwise, a mistake that I have made many times previously is I've gone all the way through and punctured actually through the bottom, and it doesn't look nice. So with that, you have a nice pustule that you can also add some smaller ones with, just with a much smaller cylindrical item. Here I'm using a Citadel plastic glue rod, just from an old plastic glue that has been long empty. And these you don't want to go nearly as deep, because if you do, then you'll most probably not go through the entire thing, but it will look a bit weird, and you won't actually see the pustule itself. There'll just be a big hole. And you can just add this around the already made pustule, or you can even add it to other things that aren't pustules that I'll show you later on in the video. And there, you have a nice fleshy growth with pustules all over it to add to your model. Now, pustules aren't the only thing that you can add to these growths. If you have an idea in your head, just go for it and see how it looks. Like for an example here, on a Knight Tyrant, I have put a person trapped inside of the fleshy growth, and I think it looks very Nurgle. And also here, a similar thing I've done, where I've added a skull to the fleshy growth fused to the carapace of the model. If you have an idea in your head, see how it looks, and if you don't like it, you can always start over. Now here I have a poxwalker, of which to his base I have added a worm, and I will now show you how to get this nice texture on the green stuff. And just bear in mind, you don't necessarily have to add this to a base, you can add it to a model, as I've done with this knight I showed you at the beginning of the video. However, I haven't made this one properly because I hadn't actually discovered how to make the worms how they actually should be. Here I just kind of rolled up a bit of green stuff and called it a day. But what you want to do is, again, grab your green stuff and make sure it's wet. And you're going to want 1 or 2, they both work fine, hair combs. And here it gives you a nice variation on how you can actually have the grooves. You just want to grab the green stuff, just roll it up into a nice sausage. Nice and thin, but you don't want to go too thin. And you do want it to be even as well, which this currently is not. There. I think that'll do if I'll just pull off that end. There. So all you want to do is either put a hair comb down if you have 2 and lay it on there, or just lay it on your palette, and then brush the second hair comb if you're using 2, or just the normal one, onto the green stuff and just roll it back and forth. Now, the reason I say you can have 2 is because it'll put this nice texture on both sides, but one, as you can see, has worked fine, especially if you're going to be having this side down on the floor. But I think that's turned out very well, and this could pass as a worm, tentacles, guts, whatever you want. So next we'll come to the converting side of this video, and the very first thing I'm going to show you will intertwine with the previous fleshy growth that I've already shown you. But it can stand on its own, but I think it just looks a lot better with it. And of course, I'm talking about spikes. Now, these spikes I've used on these 2 knights, I believe are Carnifex chitin thorns. I could be wrong on that, but I think that's what they are. And an example of how you shouldn't apply the green stuff that we've previously shown you how to do is like how I've done it here. What I actually did here is wrapped it around the spike rather than what I did here, which, as you can see, looks a lot better. As what I did here is I actually put the green stuff on top before I'd actually sculpted it, and put the spikes through the green stuff, so they actually were stabbed through, so they already naturally looked like they were erupting from the flesh, and it just looks a lot better. And another thing that doesn't immediately jump to mind, or at least didn't immediately jump to mind for me, but is actually quite an obvious choice, is bells. Now, obviously, bells are quite iconic for Nurgle, and so they come in many Nurgle kits. These 3 that I have on these 2 models specifically are from, I believe, the Plague Bearers kit, and they're from like an icon, I think it is. Another thing that is very similar is we're returning to the big boy, the Knight Tyrant. Here I've added a nice charm. I believe, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think Mortarion has 2 options for his arm. The pausing options, obviously, because he doesn't have kit options. And his weapon has this dangling off it. Because I have a Mortarion kit, but I can't remember whether it did come with 2 options. So I think that's what this is from, if you want to replicate this specifically. And I've also added a nice Nurgle symbol here on the carapace, just to make it look like it has truly become chaos and succumbed to the diseases of Nurgle. But if you ever want any ideas on converting for your Nurgle models, particularly vehicles, I find are very enjoyable to convert, and all of these methods that I've previously shown you in this video will all work tremendously on vehicles like tanks or knights, because as you may have noticed, all but one of these models have been knights. But if you ever want more inspiration, just look at already existing Nurgle models and think, what makes these look like they are a Nurgle model? What jumps out to you and makes them look disgusting? But with that, thank you so much for watching, and would really appreciate some support over on our Patreon. And please follow the links in the description to our Instagram, where you can find all of our work, including some of the stuff I have previously shown in this video. But with that, I'll see you next time.